So as India takes strides towards the future, some nations are turning the clock back, like Zimbabwe. It has reintroduced gold as a currency. That's right, Zimbabwe has launched new digital tokens. They are backed by gold. It's a move to replace Zimbabwe's actual currency. It's called the Zimbabwe dollar. What explains this move? To answer that, I must tell you about Zimbabwe's economy. It's in a bad shape, and that's an understatement. Inflation has shot through the roof. In December 2022, inflation touched a whopping 280%. It's not inflation anymore. It's what economists call hyperinflation. The Zimbabwe dollar is in trouble. It lost more than half of its value during 2022. You needed 2,200 Zimbabwe dollar for $1. 2,200 Zimbabwe dollars for $1. Now the currency has stabilized a bit, but it's yet to make a full recovery. What's the exchange rate now? About 360 Zimbabwe dollars for $1. The government is trying to contain the fall, hence the switch to gold. In July last year, physical gold coins were pushed into the market. They were made available as currency. People could buy them using the Zimbabwe dollar. And now Zimbabwe has introduced digital gold. It works just like the physical gold scheme. You can buy them using the money you have. But why switch to gold? Zimbabwe says this will help in stabilizing the currency. How? By cooling the demand for the US dollar in the country. You see, when the crisis began, people started exchanging the local currency for the US dollar. That's because the US dollar, had more value. Now the government wants gold to replace the US dollar and contain the crisis. It's an ambitious experiment. Experts are not sure it will work, though. Although Zimbabwe is not the only country toying with this idea, in recent years, many countries have adopted digital currencies, and that too in different forms. But few have managed to take off. Take the case of El Salvador. In 2021, it recognized Bitcoin as legal tender. It was the first country to do so. El Salvador's central bank put Bitcoin in its reserves. Citizens were allowed to pay taxes in Bitcoin. Businesses were asked to accept Bitcoin as payment. Why did El Salvador turn to Bitcoin? Because of its economic situation. Its public debt had crossed 100% of its GDP. The US dollar was the official currency of El Salvador, but it was unable to borrow using the dollar. So it turned to Bitcoin. Today, it accepts both the US dollar and Bitcoin. Now, initially, the move caught the world's attention, but the experiment has not really delivered. In fact, the switch to Bitcoin has proved to be costly for this country. El Salvador spent $375 million on the Bitcoin project. As of last year, the country had lost $60 million on this bet, primarily due to low adoption, meaning not many people made the switch, and also because of the fluctuating value of Bitcoin. So that's the El Salvador story. Elsewhere, there are more experiments happening. Central banks around the world are mulling their own digital currency, like Sweden, like China, Norway, Japan. They're all exploring options. In fact, a total of 114 countries are exploring the idea. They represent 95% of the world's GDP. So far, 11 countries have launched a digital currency. This list includes India too. In December last year, India had launched a pilot project for the rupee. But this is fundamentally different from what Zimbabwe is doing, from Zimbabwe's monetary experiment. Because most central banks are not using gold or Bitcoin, they're building their own digital currency. And these are linked to their official currencies, not to other assets. And why is this difference significant? Let me explain. Prices of gold or Bitcoin are determined by the market. But a central bank digital currency is issued and operated by the state. So it tends to be more stable. It's less vulnerable to external shocks. Now, these are mostly experiments, but they're worth documenting because one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Digital money is the future of currency. Governments must explore. But they must also remember that only robust mechanisms will survive. El Salvador tried the Bitcoin, it failed. Zimbabwe is turning to digital gold, it may not work. These are, at best, stopgap arrangements. They fail to address the real problems in these economies, the problems of inflation and debt. 2 years after they seized power, the Taliban are being legitimized. And the support comes from usual quarters, Pakistan and China. They have granted the Taliban their wish. Afghanistan will join the Belt and Road Initiative. Its Pakistan leg is called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC or CPEC. It will now be extended to Afghanistan. The announcement came on Sunday after a meeting in Islamabad. The foreign ministers of Pakistan, China and Afghanistan met. They issued a joint statement. And this statement announced the extension of CPEC. So first, let's tell you more about CPEC. It's a showpiece project of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's China's massive infrastructure undertaking in Pakistan. So far, China has poured more than $60 billion into it. But CPEC is still a loss-making enterprise, and it has almost bankrupted Pakistan. The country is buried under Chinese debt, and it's struggling to keep up. The investments are massive, the returns negligible. Plus, there is political instability, even civil unrest over CPEC. Military groups are protesting against Chinese projects. They want to drive China out of Pakistan. Chinese assets are under growing threat in Pakistan. So long story short, CPEC is hurting both China and Pakistan. Then why do they want to extend it? If security and return on investment are challenges in Pakistan, imagine what it will be like in Afghanistan. It's a terrorist regime after all. Yet China has decided to invest. How does it plan to expand the project into Afghanistan? The joint statement does not mention the plan. It does not say what the plan is. It's just an expression of intent as of now, but reports say the groundwork has begun and the Taliban is quite keen to get on board. Well, why won't they? They're desperate for money, for any kind of investment. And China has been a willing partner. Earlier this year, they signed their first contracts, Beijing and Kabul. These were petroleum projects. Do you know who got the contract? A subsidiary of China National Petroleum Corporation. They will extract oil from the Amu Darya Basin. This is in northern Afghanistan. And this contract should tell you what Taliban brings to the table, the natural resources of Afghanistan. This country is said to be sitting on a ton of minerals, reserves of iron, copper and gold. They're scattered across provinces and they're worth almost $1 trillion. Hence China's interest and risk-taking appetite. If Afghanistan joins CPEC, China can access these reserves, these $1 trillion reserves. The Taliban could offer these in exchange for Chinese investment, and that's exactly what Beijing has been eyeing. So that's one reason why it wants to expand CPEC. But it's not the only reason. CPEC is proving to be a financial burden. Since inception, the project has been unsustainable. Simply too big for a country like Pakistan. As of May 2022, just 3 projects in Gwadar have been completed, 12 remain unfinished. Gwadar is the main hub for CPEC. China is building a massive port there. And it's been looking for more investors. First, China tried to rope in countries with actual money, countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but the initiatives did not materialize. Then Beijing tried to woo regional players like Turkey and Uzbekistan. Again, no luck. So Afghanistan was perhaps the last remaining option. China will work with the Taliban to revive CPEC. It hasn't officially recognized the regime, but investment, we say, is as good as official recognition. This is basically a rescue deal to deleverage Pakistan and to extend China's debt trap into Afghanistan. So a clear win-win for Beijing. Even though the larger picture for BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, looks grim. This, like I said, was Xi Jinping's pet project. It was conceived to extend China's influence in the world, but Belt and Road is now a story of roadblocks and multiple defaults. Let me show you some numbers. In 2022, 60% of China's overseas lending went to borrowers in distress. China has invested in more than 1,200 projects across the world. Reports say nearly 10% of these have failed or are delayed. And soon, BRI could witness a high-profile departure. I'm talking about Italy. Italy joined the BRI in 2019 with much fanfare, but now Rome is rethinking its membership. There's a growing anti-China sentiment in Europe, and it has put Italy in a tricky spot. In 2021, Rome froze the partnership with China, and now it could be planning a complete exit. Reports say a decision is expected later this month. It may be announced at the G7 summit in Japan. G7 is the group of 7 biggest economies of the world. Italy is a member. Its exit from BRI will be a major setback for China, perhaps the first of many. Trade and connectivity is one way to cement ties. Defense is another. Partners who fight together stay together. In fact, let's tweak that a bit. Partners who sell weapons to each other stay together. I know it's not ideal. An arms race anywhere in the world is destabilizing, But such is the reality. If you want peace, you must prepare for war. Which brings us to India's defence industry. New Delhi has always been a buyer in the global arms market. The army was big, the local defence industry wasn't. So the only option was to import. But now things are changing. India's defence exports are picking up. I have some numbers for you. In 2016-17, India's defence exports were worth 1,500 crore rupees. Next year, it was 4,600 crore rupees. In 2019-2020, exports reached more than 9,000 crores and last year just shy of 16,000 crore rupees. That's a very impressive trajectory. From 1,600 crores in 2016 to 16,000 crores in 2022. But the government's target is even bigger. New Delhi is hoping to sell weapons worth $5 billion by 2025. That's around 35,000 crore Indian rupees. More than double what is being sold today. So what's the plan of action? How will they do this? Reports say the government is plotting a marketing push. More defense attaches will be deployed in Africa and West Asia. Who's an attaché? An official or envoy with a specialized job. In this case, to sell weapons in Africa and West Asia. India sees both these regions as key markets. At the same time, attaches in traditional markets will be reduced, like maybe Russia or France. These are countries India usually buys weapons from. So the broad idea is to turn away from imports to exports. Not just state-owned ones, but also private ones. I'll tell you why. Around 70% of India's defense exports are from the private sector. Most of these are parts, not full weapons. Things like simulators or armored vehicles or night vision equipment and fuselages. The defense attaches will promote these products as well. And I know what you're thinking. Why would government officials push for private companies? Because it's common practice in the defense industry. When Lockheed Martin sells something, the US government is inevitably involved. Same with France and Dassault. Right now, the Indian private sector is limited to parts. Lockheed Martin and Tata will be making fighter wing ship sets. Boeing and Tata already make fuselages for Apache helicopters. Adani Defense is making parts for Israeli drones. So the parts business is going well. But that's not where the big money is. The big money is in the sophisticated and lethal weapons like attack helicopters, missile systems and fighter jets. If India can sell those, it's a jackpot. The BrahMos missile is already in great demand. The Philippines has already bought it. Reports say Indonesia is also interested. By the way, that's another key market for India, Southeast Asia. These countries have two major requirements. A, the weapons must be effective but affordable. And B, they must not be of Chinese origin. And you can see why. Southeast Asia needs weapons to counter Chinese aggression. So buying from China is out of the question. America and France are way too expensive. Russia is a largely unknown partner, which leaves them with what? India. The equation is a bit different in Africa and West Asia. Those countries already buy from the US and Russia, so getting them to change sellers will be hard. Hence the marketing push. The defense attaches will be tasked with promoting Indian weapons to convince countries to switch sellers. But as always, there will be challenges. For starters, India isn't alone. Other countries are also eyeing the defense market, like South Korea. They recently got a fighter deal jet with Malaysia. India's Tejas aircraft was also shortlisted, but in the end, Malaysia went with a Korean jet. And such setbacks are natural, but they should not become a trend. You see, India is trying to breach a market that has not changed in decades, which means innovation will be required, not just in products, but also in sales tactics. I'll give you the example of Egypt. They're also interested in India's Tejas fighter jet, Egypt. Reports say New Delhi is going the extra mile, even offering to transfer technology and set up a local production unit. Such tactics will help in the long run. They will give India an edge over competitors. Of course, there are critics too. Some say India is stretching its legs even before sitting. They point to the recent CIPRI report on military spending. What does the report say? It says that India is still the largest military importer. It makes up 11% of all imports, which is true. But the trajectory has changed. The value of those imports has been falling. So it's important to stick to the plan. First, increase local capacity, then demonstrate reliability and effectiveness, and finally, push them into the market. Now, stalled BRI is good news for India and the West. Question is, what do they do about it? Do they wait for the BRI to implode or do they get proactive? I would say option 2. Now is the time to go on the offensive. One such plan seems to be in the works. It's a massive connectivity project. The plan is to link all West Asian countries with trains, those in the Gulf, those in the Levant, and all of them will be connected by train. These trains will lead to shipping ports in the Gulf, and those ports will connect the region to India. So it's a cross-continental plan. Trains will integrate West Asia, ships will connect West Asia to India. So who's on board? 4 countries at the moment. It's the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and India. Their national security advisors met in Saudi Arabia on Sunday. India was represented by NSA Ajit Doval. He held talks with his 3 counterparts. But where exactly did this plan come from? Apparently Israel. Now you may remember the West Asian Quad, also called the I2U2. The 4 members are Israel and India, that's I2, and the UAE and the US, U2. It was set up in 2021 to counter China's influence in the region. In one of the I2U2 meetings, Israel reportedly proposed this, a rail link to integrate West Asia. The White House ran with this plan, and since they looped Saudi Arabia in, Israel could not be part of the project, but reports say that could soon change. It could change in the future. And what about India? Where does India figure in this plan? New Delhi is bringing in the expertise, and frankly, it's a no-brainer. India has the 4th largest railway network in the world. Total passengers, around 24 million every day, plus 203 million tons of freight. Nobody knows better when it comes to railway integration. So that's how the plan came around. But what's in it for each party? For the US, it's a chance to contain China's influence, to offer an alternative to the BRI. Also to patch up ties with Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is no fan of Joe Biden. He's been reaching out to Beijing lately. Even let them broker a peace deal with Iran, so Washington is eager to retain its old ally. For Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the gain is material. A solid railway network in the region, it means more connectivity, easier trade and easier tourism. For India, there are multiple gains. The obvious one, of course, is connectivity. India's trade with Gulf countries is almost $154 billion. Most of that is oil. The shipping lanes could help increase the trade. It will also help the Indian community living in the Gulf. How many people are we talking about? More than 85 lakh. They are the backbone of most Gulf economies. That's the economic side of things. Politically, this project is even more important for India. And I'll tell you why. Iran and Saudi Arabia recently normalized relations. It looks like India had no clue about it. Even worse, the deal was brokered by China. This trend cannot be allowed to grow, the trend of ceding strategic space to Beijing. It happened with Iran in 2020. China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement with Tehran. If the same happens with Gulf states, India is going to lose out. That's why this railway project is so important, because West Asia is changing and India must keep up. Look at what's happening in Syria. Bashar al-Assad's regime is back in the Arab League. It was removed in 2011 during the civil war, but now West Asia is embracing Assad again. Last week, Iran's president visited Syria. Soon after, foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Egypt visited. My point is, there is a growing clamor for normalcy, to put conflicts behind, to live in stability, if not peace. Connectivity will be key to that dream. Just look at Europe, for instance. The European Union's origins were economic, not political. Today, those countries are joined at the hip. They don't fight, not because they love each other, but because it would be self-destructive. And I'm not saying that West Asia has reached that stage. I'm saying that should be the goal. And India should actively contribute to it. Push for a multipolar West Asia, not beholden to China or the US. India has the goodwill and the skill to do that. So the West Asian Rail project is a good start, but let's hope it actually goes beyond the blueprint. Let's hope this one actually gets implemented. To Pakistan now, which is making news for another first. Not enough people to go on the Hajj pilgrimage. For the first time in history, Pakistan has surrendered its Hajj quota. It is returning some of it to Saudi Arabia. Why is this significant? Because it shows how desperate Pakistan is for cash. By sending fewer people to the Hajj, it is saving $24 million. Much needed money, no doubt. But it says a lot about Pakistan's situation and priorities in the face of a cash crunch. Thousands of Pakistanis are skipping the annual pilgrimage because they don't have enough money to make ends meet. Our next report tells you more.
Pakistan, a country in the throes of an economic crisis. The Pakistani rupee keeps losing value. Its foreign reserves are at precarious levels. And it's dealing with rampant inflation. So what has the government decided to do about it? No, not cut its bloated defense budget. Instead, Pakistan has surrendered its Hajj quota. The Hajj is one of the pillars of Islam. Muslims from around the world go to Mecca to complete the pilgrimage. It becomes difficult for Saudi Arabia to deal with the number of visitors. So the kingdom gives a set quota to all nations. Only a fixed number of Hajj pilgrims are allowed from a nation every year. The quota is calculated based on a country's Muslim population, and Pakistan has always complained it wasn't enough. But this year, it had to surrender the quota it was allocated. It's because not enough people signed up for the Hajj. In normal years, Pakistan runs a lottery to distribute the Hajj seats. But this year, everyone who applied could go, and even then the quota wasn't filled. Why? Because Pakistan's economic woes have made the Hajj unaffordable. The Hajj costs pilgrims around $4,300. That translates to 1.2 million Pakistani rupees this year. In rupee terms, that's an increase of almost 70% compared to last year. The exorbitant rise in costs is due to Pakistan's crashing currency. It has made the Hajj unaffordable for many in the country, which is why Pakistan wasn't able to meet its quota. So, Pakistan decided to surrender that unmet quota to Saudi Arabia. If it hadn't, it would have incurred additional costs, because the government would have had to pay for every empty Hajj seat too. Islamabad would have had to pay Riyadh for travel and lodging even if there weren't pilgrims. So Pakistan decided to cut its losses instead. Reports say it'll save about $24 million. That's money the government could definitely use. And what happened to those extra Hajj permits? Reports say they've gone to Indonesia. But Pakistan's surrender may have long-term repercussions. It regularly complains about the Hajj quota allocation. It has been asking for a larger share for years now. This surrender might mean it'll have issues getting more Hajj visas in the future. So did Pakistan make the right choice giving up its seats? That's a difficult question. On the one hand, there may have been other avenues to save money, like the bloated military expenses we mentioned earlier. But then, is it the government's job to facilitate pilgrimages? Isn't religion supposed to be a personal thing? Then why are pilgrimages subsidized? Shouldn't the onus be on religious bodies and trusts and not the taxpayers? Pakistan's quota surrender was to cut costs, but maybe it can start a conversation about the government's role in religion.
And our last story today is also from the US, but this one is about a life saved. Doctors have performed brain surgery on a fetus. You know, an unborn baby inside a womb? It has undergone a brain surgery, the first of its kind, and it has saved the baby's life. She's now a healthy 7-week-old infant, and she may not know it yet, but she's also made history because this was a groundbreaking operation. It says something about how far science has come. Doctors performing surgeries on a fetus. About half a century ago, such surgeries were merely an idea. Today, they're more common than we know. Tiny patients depend on them. And for parents, fetal surgery can be the difference between grief and hope. Here's a report.
Survival. It's the most basic of our needs, the purpose behind our evolution, and a fight worth fighting. But for some, this fight begins almost too early, even before they take their first breath. We're talking about unborn babies. Many of them struggle with birth defects. What are these defects? They're problems in a baby's body. They are present at birth, which means these problems happen when a baby is developing inside the mother's body, and they can affect almost any body part, from how their body looks to how it works. Birth defects harm thousands of babies each year. In the US, 1 in 33 babies is born with a birth defect. That is 120,000 babies per year. In India, the number is about 487,000. Birth defects kill thousands soon after their birth, about 240,000 newborns worldwide to be specific. they die within a month of birth every year. Meanwhile, other babies often continue to live with their bodily problems and lead a life full of suffering. Because fetal problems are hard to fix, operations on unborn babies are risky. After all, they are medicine's tiniest patients. They're also the most vulnerable. But in the past few decades, science has presented nothing short of miracles. It has successfully performed fetal surgery over and over. As the name suggests, this is surgery done on fetuses. It repairs birth defects in the womb. It goes without saying that fetal surgery is highly complex. It requires extreme precision, and it sounds scary. It's gut-wrenching for the parents. But with each passing year, more and more people have begun trusting it. The science behind it has improved dramatically. One example of this is making headlines. An unborn child in Boston has had a brain surgery. It's a groundbreaking operation, the first of its kind, performed to treat a rare brain condition, a life-threatening one. So you can imagine how drastic the progress has been in this field. India too proved this in March this year. Surgeons performed a 90-second medical miracle, heart surgery on an unborn baby, an intricate surgery in a heart the size of a grape. But it's not just the brains and hearts that are being repaired. About 5 years ago, surgeons in the UK repaired spinal cords of fetuses. It is surprising and impressive. But one wonders, why can't such intensive surgery be performed after the birth of a baby? It can, and it has been. But in all the cases we just talked about, sometimes that is too late. If the surgery happens after birth, there are higher chances of poor health. In high-risk cases, many babies die despite surgery. Others get very sick immediately.
Get 4 fingers under there, it's great, isn't it? Yeah.
Keeping that in mind, fetal surgery shows immense potential. The cases differ, and we're not giving you a medical opinion here, but merely highlighting the promise of fetal surgery. It has improved the quality of life of many babies, identified abnormalities much sooner, and given the world hope.
I have news for you, and for a change, it's not about war or an impending recession or a virus. It's more personal, and it's good news. Firstpost has crossed 1 million subscribers on YouTube. In our world of more than 8 billion people, this may seem like a very small number, but for me and my team, it means a lot, more than we can put in words. And I'm here to thank you for your support, because this has been a very special journey, both personally and professionally. In a country with 400 news channels, who needs another news platform? We asked ourselves this question every day as we put together the show for you. Why should you watch us? Why should you subscribe to us? We think of this every day. When we started in January, we had less than 200,000 subscribers. It was a very, very small base, but you cheered us from the word go. We launched Vantage on the 26th of January this year, and you joined our journey. In a post-pandemic world, going viral can be a tricky affair, but trust me when I say this, we are not complaining about this virality. You watched and shared our stories, and they started coming back to us. It's the biggest prize, I say. If you think I'm getting carried away, please bear with me. Like I said, this has been special. It's been a learning curve. Because we knew our stories, we understood our subjects, but we were getting used to the medium. You helped us with feedback and so many comments. Thank you for writing. You told us what won't work and what we shouldn't be doing. Thank you for critiquing. And you kept coming back every day to watch us. Thank you for watching and subscribing. We hear you, so keep the conversation going. We truly believe that in this day and age, time is more valuable than anything, and you give us your time. We are committed to making it worthwhile, to highlighting India's perspective on global issues, to tracking developments that shape our world, to reading between the lines, and to telling stories that really matter. In the weeks and months ahead, we will bring you more shows. We are entering a very exciting phase. We want to experiment. We want to take you where the story is. You know, they're right when they say that storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas in the world today. And you help us hone that skill. So thank you for making us 1 million strong. I say, we're only getting started. Paris has been and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.